All right, I just sent the email chain. Let me know when you guys are all good to go. Is everyone good?
I haven't received it.
Okay. Judges, you guys received it? All right. Judge Nicholas?
Sorry, I still haven't received it.
Have you tried checking your spam yet?
I did, and it wasn't there.
Okay. Was the email you pasted into chat correct? Because I pasted it directly. Okay, let me try sending it again. I could also drop it in chat if that would be helpful to you.
Sure.
Okay. I just sent another email to you, competitor.
Do you mind just putting in chat for now, and then I'm sure it'll eventually show up, I guess.
Yeah, I actually don't have any of the things that you can attach it from. I don't have a way of attaching it.
Can you not click the file one?
Yeah, but it says you have to upload from Dropbox, Microsoft OneDrive, Google Drive, Box, or Microsoft SharePoint. Judges, maybe you guys could try sharing it to her if that wouldn't be a burden, because I sent 2 emails with the email linked in chat.
Yeah, I can send it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I will as well.
I sent it.
Thanks.
I sent it as well.
Oh, yeah, I just got it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready now. Sorry.
All right, everyone's good to go. Time starts. I affirm the appropriation of outer space by private entities is unjust. I value morality because the resolution concerns the impact of a state action. The standard is maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. Prefer because 1, pain and pleasure are intrinsically valuable. Moen 16. Pleasure is intrinsically valuable and pain is intrinsically disvaluable. There is something good about pleasure and something bad about pain. B, all other reasoning and frameworks are circular. We quantify frameworks and impacts as good or bad because they evoke pleasure or pain. 2, extinction first. A is future lives. Trillions of future lives are lost. They are just as valuable as current ones. existence. Anything else that says some lives are worth less than others is genocidal rhetoric. B, regardless of probability, extinction outweighs 1% of infinity is still infinity. C, extinction is a prereq and is the worst impact under any framing. Irreversibility, future generations, and moral uncertainty. Max skill 14. It's very good to prevent human extinction. Extinction is an irreversible scenario, and if we continue to exist, we always have the option of letting ourselves go extinct in the future. But if we go extinct, then we can't bring ourselves back. We should expect ourselves to progress morally, as we have progressed in the past, so that in a few centuries' time, we'll have better evidence about how to evaluate human extinction than we currently have. Contention 1 is space mining. Space economic incentives of space mining make it alluring. Companies are already launching. Tosker 20. Space mining companies such as Planetary Resources has already launched several mini satellites. Other companies are attracting millions. The high boost emissions successfully return a few grams of an asteroid's regolith, so the tech does exist. We're increasingly dependent on rare elements, which are expensive on Earth. These two factors can make it profitable to travel to the asteroids. Short innovation cycles means every contract counts. Klein 19. Commercial sector tends to focus more on providing innovation quickly using economies of scale. The commercial sector understands time shapes decisions because of a short innovation cycle. In a highly competitive space sector with tight margins, those unable to innovate quickly will be out of business soon. However, asteroid mining spikes the risk of satellite debris collisions. Goals 15. An asteroid's gravity is so weak that it's not hard for surface particles to escape. Could intrude where many satellites live. 5% of the debris will end up in regions traversed by satellites. Over 10 years, it would cross orbit 63 times. And satellite will suffer a satellite will suffer damaging high-speed collision. The study also looked at disruption of an asteroid 5 meters across or bigger. Its breakup would increase the risk of satellites by more than 30%. Debris is not the only issue. Space dust wrecks satellites, and debris exponentially spirals into Logia 17. When tiny particles slam into satellites, the collisions could cause the emission of hardware-frying radiation. Number of smart particles, there's hundreds of millions of those. They're going 60 kilometers per second. Dust-sized stuff may leave more insidious, invisible marks on satellites by causing electrical damage. Scenario 1 is climate. Satellites are key to environmental monitoring. Debris collapses it and causes climate change. Alonso 18. Earth observation EO satellites are playing an increasingly important role in assessing climate change. Constant and consistent data about the state of the climate is not just improving scientific outcomes, but inform climate policy. Climate-related risks require accurate, robust, sustained, and wide-ranging climate info. Reliable observational climate data help scientists test the accuracy of their models and improve the attributing events to climate change. Information help plan and implement adaptation actions. Ground-based monitoring systems data is incomplete and patchy due to a lack of such facilities. EO offer a valuable source of info for data-sparse regions. Countries and regions with a lack of climate data are vulnerable to climate change. Without insights offered by EO, there would not be enough evidence to base climate policies on, increasing the risk of maladaptation. Data inform risk management and make it more effective. Warming causes extinction. Klein 14. As global warming approaches and exceeds 2 degrees Celsius, there's a risk of triggering non-linear tipping points, drastically affecting ecosystems, rivers, agriculture, energy production, and livelihoods. It is marked by extreme heat waves, declining global food stocks, loss of ecosystems and biodiversity, and life-threatening sea level rise. There is also no certainty that the adaptation to a 4 degrees C world is possible. It is incompatible with an organized, equitable, and civilized global community. Brutal heat waves kill tens of thousands of people, could cause staple crops to suffer dramatic yield losses, ruinous hurricanes, raging wildfires, fishery collapses, widespread disruptions to water supplies, extinction, and globe-trotting diseases. 4 degrees could bring about a number of extremely dangerous feedback loops, set in motion several major tipping points. Climate change poses a clear and present danger to civilization. Scenario 2 is miscalc. Early warning satellites going dark signals attack causes miscalc and goes nuclear. Org 16. Scientists estimate that between 500,000 to 600,000 pieces of human-made space debris between 0.4 and 4 inches in size are currently orbiting Earth and traveling at over 17,000 miles per hour. Say a satellite was destroyed in orbit, it would be difficult to determine whether the event was accidental or deliberate. This lack of proof could lead to war. There have already been repeated sudden failures of military spacecraft in the last 2 decades that cannot be explained. 2 possible explanations. 1, unregistered collisions with space objects, and the second is deliberate action of a space adversary. This is a politically dangerous dilemma. Over time, space junk accumulates, and we leave most of our defunct satellites in space, and when meteors and other space debris slam into them, you get a cascade of debris. Kessler syndrome, point wherein the density of space junk grows so large that a single collision could set up increasingly more collisions. This would exacerbate the issue of identifying what or who could be behind broken satellites. The number of small-sized, non-cataloged objects will grow exponentially in mutual collisions. Nuclear war causes extinction. It won't stay limited. Edward 17. U.S.-Russia war seems unlikely, but if it were to occur, hundreds or even thousands of nuclear weapons might be launched. The consequences would be catastrophic. Average temperatures would drop as much as 7 degrees Celsius for several years. Smoke and dust would darken the atmosphere to inhibit photosynthesis, causing disastrous crop failures, widespread famine, and massive ecological disruption. I'm open for cross.
Okay. Ready? Okay, first, I guess, where do your cards talk about the debris that's going to be coming from mining? To me, it seems like it's the debris in the status quo.
It's Schools 15. It says that mining will cause more debris.
Okay, Skulls just talks about one type. I mean, in like all of the rest of your cards, especially the ones that say debris is going to hit satellites and stuff like that. Like in the card right after that, I'm
Yeah.
just confused about how this doesn't refer to the current debris.
Well, because there's not enough debris in the atmosphere right now to trigger our link. Our link is triggered by the Kessler effect, where the amount of debris in the atmosphere accumulates, and that's what triggers our link.
Do you know like how much, or I guess after we, even start mining in space, like how much debris that's going to cause and when it's going to even trigger this?
Well, I don't necessarily need empirics for this. All I can say is that the neg worsens the status quo, and that causes the ass plan.
Okay, I guess scenario 2, the climate stuff. Are there other things that play a role into climate change and like the environment?
That's scenario 1, but I'm sure
Sorry,
that
yeah.
I'm sure that there are, but satellites are key to environmental monitoring. So it's like
Why
basically,
doesn't that mean that other things like whatever pollution, greenhouse gases, why can't those also mean like the environment collapses?
well, we're also solving those in the status quo, but right now,
How?
satellites are key for environmental policy. We can't solve the rest of global warming if we don't have the policies set to design them.
How okay. Then I guess maybe last one, miscalc. Um well, one, is this like miscalculation in space or is it like terrestrial?
It's in space.
Okay, wait. Does Edward 17 talk about space war?
Well, it triggers terrestrial war because space war causes conflicts between countries.
Wait, how does it where do your cards talk about a space war? It seems like it's terrestrial.
Well, yeah, the war is terrestrial, but the impacts occur in space, and that links to terrestrial war.
Okay. I guess why don't other things on Earth prevent miscalc from happening, such as mutually assured destruction and like safety checks on all of these weapon systems?
Well, mutually assured destruction doesn't count because there are already tensions in the status quo right now, and something else could trigger that, and that would easily collapse into nuclear war.
Wait, why doesn't MAD solve for this? Like, can you give me an example of how mutually assured destruction is failing in the status quo?
Yeah, sure. But so there are many nuclear countries in the status quo right now, and they would easily fire on each other if tensions were to increase. Because in the Ukraine
Like
and Russia struggle,
which countries?
there have already been multiple scenarios where countries are on standby to fire nuclear weapons, and that's just one example of the conflict that's going on in the status quo right now.
That's fine. I still haven't received the email chain, so I apologize. I'm gonna just make a new one unless you all want it somewhere else. But Ella, I don't have your email.
Oh, okay, let me put it in the chat.
It's gonna be 2 off and then case, by the way. One sec. Okay, let me know when you'll get it. Okay, then I'm gonna start since everybody has it. County plan states should remove the most volatile and largest debris pieces from the most congested orbits, mandate UN guidelines on space debris mitigation, collaborate on techniques to track and display the location of objects in real time, and AI to automate debris avoidance maneuvers, and definitely stall deployment of low Earth orbit ASATs, declare that private appropriation of outer space by private entities is unjust except for the United States private entity investment into the low appropriation of outer space through large satellite constellations in low Earth orbit for the purpose of 5G internet. The counterplan is competitive. It does less than the plan by allowing private companies in the US to appropriate space with large satellites constellations for the purpose of 5G internet. The other planes solve the entirety of the debris scenario and solves their asteroid mining bad offense. And it competes. Satellite constellations are appropriations onto 20. Our constellations, where these large constellations constitute appropriation to constellation above because they seem to overwhelmingly possess particular orbits through the use of multiple satellites that occupy orbital planes and in a manner that precludes other actors from using these exact planes constitute an appropriation of these orbits. That solves satellites, miscal, Kessler, and debris collisions. Nature 811. It's true that a satellite an accurate and up-to-date list of where the objects are. The world needs a unified spatial management and international convention through which rules and technical standards can be organized. Participating would not compromise national security. Countries could share info with the capabilities of purpose, shift responsibility for the space track.org catalog for military stability and interviews to political tensions, and feed into global space traffic agreement. China would have a big incentive to participate. The transition has yet to occur because Congress is not allocated necessary funds. The U.S. established norms for responsible for space behavior. Recent work brings the U.S. and China the same conversation techniques to track and display locations in real time, and AI to help automate debris avoidance maneuvers is long overdue. Removing the largest debris and implementing UN mandates to solve the lack of clarity is the problem. Christoph 18. Which one is staying in orbit around the Earth? Debris parts of old satellites also spent rocket bodies. We need to start removing volatile and the biggest pieces of from the most congested orbit. Grab a piece of debris with a special satellite in Z orbit, both of them burning both objects above fermented spacecraft cemetery. Other technologies can include moving objects with a powerful laser beam. Current scientific estimates predicts that without active debris removal, orbits become usable over the coming decades. UN guidelines are key but voluntary. We need to protect this resource. American satellite networks are key to 5G dominance globally. That prevents Chinese sphere of influence. Arlington 22. So we're at the top of 5G, unlike America, China seeking to interfere everything that would take action. The US still has dominance through space, 5G through space. Washington must prepare for competition, but if the United States should support space-based or broadband networks enabling by growing constellation satellite networks can be alternative to developing countries with China. Companies penetrate Chinese companies in Africa and Latin America, so the US can limit China control to info. China 5G leadership compromises U.S. military superiority. Bogard et al. 19. Machine learning became the hands of leveraging data processing. The 5G U.S. will also consider technical implications. Huawei will hand over the data to Chinese government. The U.S. must be prepared to conduct where Chinese infrastructure is proliferated and disagree. Military communications could be undermined. The Chinese government can leverage Huawei to deny military communications. Amendments may limit precision targeting. Allies have refused an outright ban. Failure to innovate will have deleterious effects for the distribution of power. Chinese tech supremacy appends the balance of power that goes nuclear. Crowing 18. New technology causes nuclear conflict by appending the balance of power. The bargaining model of war shift the balance of power, undermining effective bargaining. New technologies threaten to create a shift in the balance of power. China's increased military ability. China's defeated that could be decisive for the future of the warfare, including 5G wireless connectivity. Beijing may be more willing to initiate conflict over Taiwan. Scenarios could bring these nuclear powers into direct conflict. There's an inherent risk of nuclear conflict through workmanship, accident, or inevitable escalation. Preserve prevailing power balance. The consequence of Washington losing risk for technical superiority may be nuclear Armageddon. 2. Commercial asteroid mining is coming now. Lower cost and improving tech make it economically viable. And the legal basis is already in place in multiple countries that helps acquire water for rocket fuel and rare earth minerals. Gilbert 21. Since the fact that the daily cost energy for the private sector is but it's a front end analysis believe developments maybe because of running on the asteroids. Baby steps are being taken. That's a word contract sadly irregular by beginning. Commercial space mining research facilities are virtually unlimited compared to those on Earth. Potential economic, scientific, and even security benefits underlie space mining. The United States is emerging in front of creating legal or for mineral exploitation. Recognize the property rights of private companies to materials gathered in space. The UAE are racing to codify resource laws. China views resources development as a priority. Fossil bodies are resources for natural materials that are incredibly valuable. Water can be split to make rocket fuel, and rare earth minerals are potential targets required for electronics and bloom as bottlenecks and making the transition from fossil fuels and renewables back to byproduct resources. However, the legal framework that strikes the best balance for providing economic incentive for mining while preventing unbeneficial land claims requires a doctrine of appropriation. The plan prevents that. Mayors 15. Doctrine of appropriation is reasonable. Real educating asteroid claims that could easily be applied to asteroid mining energy could be put obtained metal to beneficial use. The doctrine modified to find beneficial use by providing beneficial use is assumed for any reason removed in the asteroid belt where the mining entity can hope to transfer to the market and return journey with the astronomical cost of undertaking each of the modification would be limit entities to what they can carry back, not overlay the burdensome of corporate interest at the same time as economic imperative for the rapid development of asteroid resources. Knows that asteroids may be extremely beneficial to mankind and a source of resources that determine offer in space by allowing ownership and appropriation. That can be incentivized to development of space in a way that reflects the need of society without having an absolute monopoly. Asteroid mining offsets terrestrial growth of the environment and enables solar panel satellites, both solve solve climate change. Taylor 19. The mission doesn't necessarily benefit from its very role in the entire economy is sitting on a run that has to keep growing over the political might take the industrial growth off a world where it can't do any more harm than to buy the climate change fix. So as team Ashwin is the only way we're going to build solar power satellites in a form of solar power collection more effective than any on Earth in space. It's always double high noon. A solar system could supply over 1,000 more times the power than a solar farm currently in existence. We're looking at 20-year window to completely replace human civilization power infrastructure. We're missing millions of tons of material. Astro material can break it there. I'm going to skip Faro 19. I'm going to go down to craze. 1, the debris impacts are about current debris, not mining debris. Read their cards, approves all causes set, and they can't solve the case. I'm going to skip the next card too. No debris cascades, but even in worst case, it's defined to low Earth with no impact. Fang 17. That's if our head goes down, but they did it wrong. Low LEO things burn up quickly. High LEO work junk orbits, mid orbit, GPS, and other nav satellites. Our volume is so huge and number is so few. We don't need to worry about here. GEO is stats moving at the same speed. Also, only 1 per 1,000 kilometers is not a problem. Imagine worst case operating at tiny, less than 1 in 10,000. We don't lose accident in real life. Plus, effect, which makes even less of a problem. Debris spread over a volume, not a single surface, making collision order magnitude less likely. Most will have a slower orbit or velocity. This makes the orbit much sooner. Small objects deorbit in months. Larger objects can be tracked in 40 calculations, so none lower EO. But all new launches include a plan to deorbit. I'm going to skip down, go on to climate. This often see for climate, the AF bans all private appropriation. The climate stats that they say are keto warming get banned by the AF shifts. Only government-owned stats. It's much worse. Harrison Bednar 17. With the GPS and environmental monitoring, our grids are the ways we interact with space conflicts. The government-dominated orbit. A large proportion of the space is Earth observation data from satellites built and operated by private companies and edges offered by commercial companies at resolution or at an order of magnitude better than government counterpart. Private companies have emerged as a top provider of critical information about climate change. Next, miscalc, no miscalc hotlines and info sharing. Solve. Land 16. China wishes for international cooperation to set up between to allow easy sharing of detective avoidance, misunderstanding of accidents. Russia and China signed a strategic partnership agreement. India signed agreement with China, even if there is miscalc, no one would escalate official statements. Kobe 16. No believes that it would be preclude to total nuclear war. The U.S. check if China or Russia positively foolish official statements offer no indication it would respond massively to strikes. Senior officials have telegraphed deterrence strategies. I didn't cut any cards, but I didn't read some. I can go over the ones I didn't read if needed. But it was the last one on the second, the Kafaro 14. And then I read the first one under case, just overall for debris. So I didn't read, I read the second one on case, that's Fang 17 for debris. And then I didn't read the CSTP 20, the Jamola 18, and then the IDB card.
All right, could I get a clarification for that?
Sure. I said I didn't read the Kafaro. It's under the second one. I didn't read CSTP. I didn't read Jamola. Those two are on case. And then I didn't read IDB 18.
Okay.
That's under the warming.
You read Harrison and Bender, correct?
Yes.
All right. Are you good for cross?
Yeah.
First on your counter plan, you said that states should remove the most volatile and largest debris, but how does that account for space dust?
For what?
Space dust.
Space dust? Sure. One, we've read cards on case that prove for why that space dust isn't really going to do much harm. The Fang 17 is able to account for this and say that like it's not really going to do a lot. But even if it does, when it does get to the point in time when that debris or when that space dust, maybe gets really harmful, it's going to be removed.
Okay, next you said that your argument solves SATs, miscalc, Kessler, and debris, but how does it do that?
Sure. Basically, by removing debris, there's no impact to debris, means that there's no hitting satellites, there's no Kessler effect because all the debris is basically removed.
Okay. Now onto your, you impacted solar on astromining, but how would solar power from space get to Earth?
Sure. I don't think you should look at it as solar power from space gets to Earth. It's talking about different things like that.
Isn't your argument literally enables solar
power? It's not saying that like we're making solar panels in outer space. It's saying that the resources that we get from asteroids and from mining and all of that stuff enables us to make these new solar powered systems and enables us to make all of these new changes.
So you're saying solar farming in space, basically?
Not so much solar farming. It's just saying we're getting like resources and minerals from space and like stuff like that.
Okay, you say that this technology is key to build solar-powered satellites, but why can't we use the tech that we have now to build them?
Yeah, that's where our Gilbert 21 card talks about. It talks about the depletion we're going through of these kind of rare earth metals and like a bunch of other things on Earth. That's why we need asteroids. It specifically talks about, like for electronics too, the only way that we can get it is by having these kind of metals. We're running out of them on Earth. Asteroids have them.
Okay. Next, onto your responses to case, you said that AF bans all private appropriation. Do you count satellites and do you count government satellites under that?
Yeah,
But why would that link into appropriation?
because, okay, no, if the AF is whole res, it's still going to be banning the appropriation of these climate satellites. We've also read cards on the counter plan that can get applied here because it talks about how like the satellites are kind of also appropriation. If you look at the Johnson 20
Right.
card,
But are government satellites also appropriation?
I would say so. Like if you're banning all appropriation, especially of
How are
outer
government satellites
space,
appropriation?
how are regular, like how is mining appropriation? It's still doing the same thing.
Okay. That's
Also, it's not only government satellites up there. There's like other stuff.
I'll be taking running prep. Time starts. All right, stop prep. I used up 2 minutes, 28 seconds. I will be reading some new cards in the 1AR, so I'll send them. Can I send them to the email chain that I've got it set up?
Yeah, and I'll forward.
Okay, thank you.
All right, it should be sent. Let me know when you guys are good to go. right, is everyone good to go? Okay.
I got in the email chain already, so
Okay.
I'm good now.
Order will be first case on space mining, and then I'll go on my opponent's case in the order of the flow. My opponent didn't challenge my morality framework, therefore we outweigh under morality. Extend space mining. Currently, private space mining and ownership allowed now under rules signed by Obama and Trump administration. That's Williams 20. Space mining is a hugely profitable industry, meaning that it provides economic incentives for private companies, which means more space mining produces debris because the gravitational pull of asteroids aren't strong enough to keep them close. Space debris destroys satellites, and destruction will increase because of an increased risk of satellite debris collisions. That's goals 15. This is two scenarios. Extend scenario 1, climate satellites. Satellites are key to environmental monitoring, and debris collapses it because it damages systems and causes extinction from not being able to monitor climate change. Scenario 2 is miscalc. Satellite destruction causes tensions between countries, and with high intentions, it would be more probable to go to nuclear war because tensions already exist, and the status quo nuclear war causes extinction. Now on to my opponent's responses. Well, my opponent says that no debris cascades, it's confined to low Earth, but we're not saying that there's no debris cascades. What we're trying to say is that if private companies are allowed to continually mine asteroids, collision risk will exponentially spiral from that point on. That's when I see schools 15. This is because asteroid mining does spike the risk of satellite dust collisions, so continuing that action will also continue to increase that risk. The neck will trigger this link into my argument, and therefore you should vote app in order to not trigger or increase collision risks. That outweighs under morality. I don't need statistics for this because I have really specific warrants that say collisions are projected to happen more and more in the near future, even if the brink isn't necessarily quantifiable. Next, my opponent says the app bans all private appropriation. Climate stats also get banned by the app, but government stats aren't appropriation. Appropriation is counterintuitive. Appropriation is lawful recognition of the right to put to beneficial use. Public sector and governments fall under that definition. Erickson 95. Appropriation is defined as the application of a specified portion of the waters to the state and beneficial use pursuant to the procedures prescribed by law. And also Merriam-Webster defines it as using resources for money. Next, so therefore government isn't appropriating resources because it shares that tech, and also appropriation is only conducted by private entities because public entities don't want to profit off of that tech. Next, my opponent says that next my space does. Next, she challenges space dust, but as I read into Logia 17, space dust also collapses satellites and causes our inability to monitor climate scenarios, and therefore that links directly into our case. Next, my opponent says that space dust still triggers. That's into Logia 17. No, now onto my opponent's counterplan. She says that states should remove the most volatile and largest debris, but space dust still triggers. That's into Logia 17. Next, my opponent says that it solves SATS, miscalc, and Kessler and debris by removing debris, but detection and mitigation failed. Popova 18. Launch creates debris that is linked to the Kessler syndrome. A cascade effect results in exponential growth when a small fraction of debris can be detected. Collision grow, even if objects are removed. Debris growth evolve. Mitigation LEO measures can only slow down the growth, but not enough to stop it. Therefore, spatium still accumulates at the aft's impact. It's not directly one hit than Kessler. It's the accumulation of space debris in space. Neg will only worsen that, and next still links into accumulation. Next, my opponent says that satellites constellations are appropriation, but I agree satellites constellations are appropriation because they are for 5G. Therefore, they don't affect my climate stats in any way because climate stats are run by the government and they're used to collect government data. Next, my opponent says that collaboration on tech to track and display locations of objects in real time, but there's already a tracking system in the status quo, but it's clearly not working. And there would still be collaborative efforts in this if the app plan gets passed, because the app is not completely eliminating innovation. It's still allowing private entities to collaborate with public entities under scenarios of government contracts. That provides innovation, that provides an incentive that they need to continue innovating. We don't need appropriation to provide them with an incentive. Next, my opponent says that 5G leadership compromises US military superiority, but China already leading in 5G in the status quo. We haven't seen them compromise US military superiority yet, therefore there's no impact. My opponent says that my opponent challenges asteroid mining, but asteroid mining bad because asteroid mining links directly into the DA. And case turn, if Kessler happens, we cannot mine any more asteroids. Mining won't even be able to happen in the first place, so they can't solve. Also impact turn mining bad causes apt impact of nuclear war and allow mining to continue damages the environment from takeoff gases of launching those mining devices up there. Also, she says it solves climate change because it enables solar powered stats, but no solar powered stats bad, directing resources into something we don't need.
Okay, I have 5 minutes. Okay, it's gonna go the mining decide, the counter plan, and then case. Okay, is everyone else ready? Okay. I'm gonna assume that everybody's ready then, and I'm just gonna start. The counterplane solves the majority of case, which proves that you should frame this on sufficiency framing. So long as the counterplane can solve the majority of case, it should be able to win. And the small part that it doesn't, the dishead will prove to outweigh the counterplane first. The counterplane solves the majority of cases. It's able to take care of all the debris, which is there internal to every single one of their impact scenarios, because the only way that this triggers anything is because they say debris hits satellites that are key to a bunch of different things, which proves that if we solve for debris, then they can't have any real impact, which proves that climate satellites can't go down and there can't be any miscalc because those satellites also can't go down. So long as we solve debris, it's able to solve for the entirety of their advantage. But also the last plank, the fifth plank of it, also is able to solve for its own independent impact, because so long as we still have to keep some amount of it in there, we still have to keep some amount of space to be allowed, even if you believe that they're right, because that's still the 5G part. We still have to keep this the satellite constellations in there for the purpose of 5G internet. We'll get more to that later, but also 5G internet is good and it turns and outweighs the majority of case. This is one gone not responded to, and there was no real cards, which means that you should be very wary of voting for any kind of real defense to the disad on its own. But even if you do, we're going to still prove for why it outweighs and turns, because if assuming that 5G internet goes down, then it's going to make sure that China gets more power over the US on military supremacy, which proves that we can't solve for any kind of miscalc scenario, because tensions are always going to be risen, or because tensions are going to rise between countries, and it's going to prevent us from solving climate change, because we're going to be one behind them, and two, we're basically going to be in a total nuclear disaster, because we're going to be at war with them, because they're going to basically just take away all of our power, which proves that we still need some kind of constellation up there. So even if they're right about the majority of the case, it doesn't matter. They haven't provided any kind of sufficient answers to the fifth plank. So you should vote entirely on that. Even if you don't believe any of the rest of it, which you still should, the fifth plank still is able to solve for the entirety of case. It's still removing all kind of appropriation except for this one type. No responses have been made to it, especially the solvency part of the pick. But now we'll just kind of go top down. One, it still is able to solve for space dust, especially when that space dust becomes dangerous. Even if the majority of that space dust, one, you can cross-apply some of the answers from case, but we'll get more to this later. Two, it's still going to be able to solve for this, because when it's actually going to threaten the satellite or do anything like that, the satellite is going to basically be able to protect themselves and ensure that there is no kind of real threat that comes from this debris scenario. That is the entirety of it. Also, our cards talk about it, such as Nature 811, which proves that there's no real chance for Kessler to happen or for it to occur. Next, the launches don't create debris as much, but even if they do, the counterplane is still able to solve for this. Again, it's removing all the debris. Obviously, the counterplane is not going to be increasing debris, it's going to be removing it. So even if you buy that rockets might, or that launches up into space might cause some debris, it doesn't matter, because the counterplane is still able to solve for it, because it's going to remove it. And there's new ADR tech that basically brings it back into Earth and takes care of all of these issues. Which, so yeah, next, the satellite constellations are appropriation. This is a pick out of it. We're just saying that these kind of constellations are good, and even if they're right about the minority, you shouldn't remove one type, which is what the last plank of it says. Next, there is already tracking in the SQO, which proves that either one, the SQO is able to solve, or two, we need to further bolster and help the SQO, which is what the counterplane does with this debris mitigation and tracking systems. Next, this innovation stuff, we're not the innovation decide. Don't let them cross-apply this. No relevance. Next, China isn't leading in the SQO. They have no evidence for this. You should be very wary of these skeptical arguments. Also, we've proven for why the US is actually winning in the SQO. It talks specifically about their dominance in 5G specifically. Even if you buy it, one, this analytic argument isn't even specific to 5G, which proves that you shouldn't buy it, and the 5G is uniquely key to their superiority because it gets implemented in other ways. Also, that's our entirety of our bar card, which proves that this one bad analytic argument shouldn't take out the majority of it, because we basically need it to happen and like we need to be able to have our 5G networks because that leads to military superiority because it gets implemented and influenced in other aspects. Without it, other forces such as China take over, which goes nuclear because there's a power imbalance, turns case because it causes miscalc and tensions rise, also means we can't solve for climate. Case, mining doesn't cause debris because companies will bring the asteroids back to Earth and mine them there to prevent debris instead of breaking them apart into space, which solves literally the entirety of the case. And every company has an overwhelming financial incentive to avoid debris. It would make their expensive investments useless and destroy their spacecrafts. So no risk of destroying the entire atmosphere. Also, there like debris isn't very likely to happen anyways because it's not going debris cascades aren't going to trigger anything. One, we've already proven for why the counterplate is able to solve this. Two, the card wasn't really answered well enough for a point where you should completely disregard it because it still proves for why it's very unlikely for the situations to happen. Debris isn't really going to trigger anything. There's nothing in LEO. It talks specifically about how there's nothing in like a 10,000 or 1,000 kilometer radius of it. It's basically not going to hit anything. Even if it does, counterplane solves. Next, warming. One, their definition doesn't prove anything about the government satellites about it. Two, private entities also monitor space. That's how we get data, which still proves that it's going to link. Also, their warming impact is wrong. One, their evidence says we can't do climate adaptation without satellites, but no evidence that countries can actually do it because of any of those measures. No political incentive to get rid of coal or oil, so it's all inevitable. Also, they banned the satellites. They said we're good. We can win on this alone. The private climate satellites that solve warming constitute an appropriation with space. Their definition literally proves nothing. You can look at it. It says nothing about the satellites or government appropriation in space. Don't count it. The miscalc stuff, one, there's no chance of miscalc happening. They didn't really answer this well either, nor did they answer the key claims that it makes in the two cards because the hotlines and info sharing prevent any kind of real miscalculation from happening or tensions from rising, even if satellites go down, proves no impact to case, only the DSAT has one, and the counterplane solves the rest of it.
I'll be taking remaining prep time, sorry. All right, that's prep. Order will first be case, and then I'll be going over my opponent's arguments in the order of mining and then the counterpoint. Everyone good? All right. Let's narrow this debate down into some key issues. The key issue of this contention is can private entities remove debris? The answer is no. Number one, my opponent didn't show or prove any developing tech that is in the status quo right now. We can't buy her argument off of the possibility of developing new tech. But let's give her the argument. She still doesn't solve. Two, Popova 18 says that mitigation and detection fail. It can't remove 100% of debris from the atmosphere. Space debris will still accumulate. That links directly into the AF's plan because it doesn't solve anything. We impact to accumulation. She doesn't solve for removing any debris because it will still accumulate. Popova 18 proves that. She didn't challenge the card, and therefore we still win on the fact that private entities do not eliminate any do not still link into our case. Therefore, it doesn't solve anything. Private entities can't remove debris. Next, onto her counter plan. She that basically eliminates all of her offense to her counterplan because it relies on the fact that it's possible for the CP to solve for debris, but she can't solve for space dust that gets released from space mining because in Logic 17 that space dust also triggers Kessler effect, and also Popova 18 said that mitigation detection fail. It can't remove 100% of debris from the atmosphere. It will still accumulate. Next, she says China is not leading in the status quo as a response to her miscap argument, but she's in contradiction with her own argument. She says that China is not leading in the status quo, and that's why judges should not value my argument. But her own case on mining dissent relies on China on 5G, relies on China taking over. Vote AF because she eliminates her own case by saying that China is not leading in the status quo. And even then, she says she doesn't get to limit her length of no debris because she doesn't respond to the fact that I said even if in the status quo debris isn't triggering anything, it will neg will still spike the risk of collision because of increasing mining and increasing appropriation in there because it doesn't stop any appropriation by private entities. Next, she says that private entities are working in collaboration to monitor space right now. They're still allowed to innovate in the status quo under government contracts that prevent appropriation. That's their new incentive if appropriation gets eliminated. Also, she says definition of government satellites doesn't count, but while my definition may not concern space, the definition of appropriation is still the same under any topic that we debate. Government entities aren't appropriation, and therefore government stats don't count. I also read Merriam-Webster definition that says appropriation is taking resources for one's own profit or benefit. And now onto her mining. Let's do some weighing. On app outweighs on time frame because by the time enough tech is developed and enough resources are mined to solve the lack of resources in climate change, Kessler will have already been triggered because of the drastic increase in mining. Since we both have extinction scenarios, value AF's extinction in the neg because neg won't matter if everyone on Earth is dead from AF's impacts. Two, app outweighs on magnitude. Mining still triggers Kessler effect, global warming sets. Even if there are more resources, our impact comes first because resources wouldn't matter if the whole entire planet was extinct. Next, onto CP, she says that 5G is good, turns in outweighs because if 5G internet goes down, China will have superiority. But she cancels out her own argument in her response to my case that says China has no power in the status quo and cannot compare to China. Also, U.S. military supremacy doesn't rely on 5G at all. It's our weapon development that actually matters, and therefore we knock out the only plank to her CP, and therefore it doesn't work. We also prove how the neg doesn't solve, and therefore I urge you to vote AF.
Good debate.
Good debate.
Give us a few minutes.
Then I'm gonna run to the restroom before the decision's back.
Okay, we're in. Are the other judges here? Mr. Nichols?
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Cool. Congratulations on reaching semifinals of MSTOC. The decision was a 2-1 for the NAG from Harvard. I'll let Mr. Nichols go first since you voted affirmative.
Yeah, a great job by you both. It was a difficult decision. I was persuaded for the AF by the debris argument, and also that the morality framework I didn't feel like had been addressed as much, but again, was a very, very close call, and congratulations to you both.
Yeah, I go next. So I voted neg because I think the pick solves the whole case. It bans appropriation, except large satellites for 5G by the US, which I don't think there's a solvency deficit to, or a reason that you know, only appropriating space via large satellites for 5G would cause debris that gets to the sort of impacts that the F has isolated. I think 5G internet control by large satellites from the US unlocks, or not doing the counter plan unlocks China tech supremacy, which causes extinction. The 1 hour didn't really answer the net benefit. I scratched some new 2 hour arguments like the US cares about weapons, not 5G. But I think even if the AF won some defense, there's not really a deficit to the pick. So it solves the whole case and avoids a functionally unmitigated China rise DA. The uniqueness stuff, I don't think the NAG double turn themselves. Their ebb is pretty clear that the US will catch up soon with 5G, which the counter plan invests in, but China lead is coming now. The deficit advantage counter plan planks weren't bad, and I think it's likely that the AF solves like some debris or dust better than the collision avoidance planks, but I just don't think it matters if the pick solves the case, because I'm not sure why these large satellites that are only being used for 5G internet would, you know, create a bunch of dust or debris that causes states to miscalculate or ruins like, or messes with environmental satellites. I don't think the F definition does you too much. Argument you could make is like the counter plan doesn't compete because satellites don't constitute appropriation, which there's, you know, legal support for. But as is, I didn't think it was super relevant. So I thought the counter plan solved the case, avoided China rise stuff, which outweighed the case.
Yeah, my reasoning was along the same lines. I think I also gave the neg a little bit of that takeout in terms of the that there's no impact on the lower Earth orbit. There are arguments that actually do quantify a little bit that the risk of cascading for Kessler is like very, very small. So that means that even if there was some sort of like comparative advantage to doing the app, it would have been like very small risk compared to like the relatively unmitigated 5G sort of like net benefit off the counter plan. Yeah, so I think that's the problem is that, like, you know, when you're going up against a pick, it does take up a lot of your case's advocacy. So I don't know, I think maybe you could have thrown in a picks bad kind of thing to just kind of like at least give them something else to target, perhaps, right? So, you know, that certainly would have, you know, because yeah, I mean, it has taken up a lot of your ground. What are you going to do, right? Unless you actually beat them on the specific net benefit, which unfortunately, I guess, you know, 1AR, that's kind of tough because of time allocation. And since you really only put one sort of analytical on it, it's really tough to get any sort of traction off of that. But, you know, great debate all around. You know, congratulations to both debaters getting here. I mean, it's such an accomplishment. And, you know, it still astounds me that you guys are middle schoolers. It just really, really boggles the mind, you know, like, you know, best of luck to both of you. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
I have one question. Do you think then I could have just kicked the debris planks, gone for the pick only, and it would have been like fine then.
Yeah, I mean, I basically just like kick them for you, or like it doesn't really matter if you kick them or not, right? If you think you can get something out of these advantage counterpoint planks, then I don't think there's like a cost to going for it. Because they don't have like permutive counterplan argument. But yeah, like I think you can just kick the advantage counterpoint planks. I don't think you need them, but I also don't think there's like a big reason not, or I don't think there's like a great reason to kick them, but like you can.
Okay. Thank you all for judging. Good debate. I'm gonna head out.
Thank you for judging. Good luck, opponent.